The intelligence officials that have briefed on these crash retrievals have talked about a number of different species having been observed to be associated with the crash. Bodies recovered are not all at the same time.
I'm aware of at least 2 advanced non-human species. One of which
me,
we're in contact with.
We're at Enzo Benelli, mafia guy turned real estate developer. He's bullied his way onto half the building contracts in Los Santos. Extortion, murder, labor racketeering, you name it. There's not a construction worker in town earning a livable wage right now, and Gold Coast Development is about to go under.
And let me guess, you got a personal interest in Gold Coast.
There you go.
Anyone think you'd done this before? According to Benelli's cell phone, he's at the construction site downtown.
It's done.
One small problem. My source squealed. Benelli's expecting a hit. Watch yourself and go equipped. You'll have a lot of muscle.
Good kid. Who's a good kid?
So in that sense,
Who's a good
they
kid?
can be seen as gifts from more intelligent species. One of the questions that would then be raised would be, well,
stay on your throne. Stay on.
More or less
Some
beer.
Make some muffins up there.
See lives and make progress.
You gonna make muffins?
It could be a giant IQ test, I say.
As we brought whistleblowers to Congress, we learned that the legacy program was involved in a long-running
part of the legacy program.
with other nations to
He's an
collect
alien.
and reverse engineer vehicles not made by humans.
Can you help me out?
I'll help you out.
In this secret theater of war, the U.S. has
I'll help you out.
adversaries in a winner-takes-all scenario.
That was the coolest punch I've ever thrown in GTA.
Geopolitical landscape.
It's just straight up uppercut
Alliances and allegiances
to a
shift
meth head.
like sand in the desert.
We would certainly prefer a situation where the retrieval is either in international waters or some other
Franklin didn't bring a ride?
uncontested location, or maybe in an allied country, but every country in the world would do everything in their
Took
power
this van.
to try to retrieve an exquisite piece of technology.
The first country that cracks the code on this technology will be the leader for years to come. This is similar to the Manhattan Project. We developed the atomic weapon. We won the war, and it made us a superpower for almost a century now. This is the atomic weapon on steroids.
Some craft could be the result of, say, our legacy program. Or, on the other hand, it might be the result of advancements made by Antimatter.
We have seen highly credible U.S. government intelligence on the Soviet recovery of a crashed UAP in 1989. They recovered a tic-tac-shaped UAP that was twice as big as the tic-tac that was encountered by the USS Striker, and they did recover 4 bodies of humanoids.
I think I got him.
The Soviet scientists
I just really wanted that car.
the recovered craft and discovered a very advanced directed energy weapon.
China is at the top of everybody's list of concern right now in the Defense Department.
Some of this UAP activity we are seeing here in the United States may actually be a result of a Chinese UAP reverse engineering program.
If Xi Jinping had access to this, if Putin had access to this, and they thought that we did not have access to similar capabilities of what they did, do you think for a second that they wouldn't consider using it to achieve their ends of domination?
And if their approach to it is driven by science and a desire to match what they think is ours, we'll wake up one day and realize, I don't know how they got there, but they got there ahead of us, and now we're screwed.
This technology can absolutely either revolutionize the way we do things or completely destroy everything that we know. It often reminds me of the famous speech by President John F. Kennedy when we were right at the threshold of entering into a new era of discovery in space.
There is new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of our people. For space science, like nuclear science and all technology, has no purpose of its own. Whether it will become a force for good or ill depends on man. And only if the United States
some of this is so secret that very, very few people in our entire government that are allowed or provided access to it.
Some presidents have been briefed on the basic facts about the situation, but they are not provided with all the details.
I think there's this assumption that presidents can walk in the Oval Office on day one and say, all right, take me to Roswell, show me the alien bodies, I want to see the video of the autopsy, I want to see the whole thing, open it up. I think that really is a naive understanding of how our government works. Even presidents have often been operating on a need-to-know basis. That's certainly true from a historic standpoint. The rationale, the justification was, the president shouldn't know about these things because that way the president always has deniability. All they need is a nod in this direction or in that direction. But that begins to ramp out of control. Frankly, I don't even know the president would know who to ask. You could go to the director of the CIA, nowadays the director of national intelligence, and ask them. And even that person may not know. Because those people rotate. But the people 3 layers underneath them that are there for 30 years, to them, it's like I've seen these people come and go. I have no obligation to tell them it exists. It just never percolates out.
A lot of people have this assumption that the director of CIA is read out to everything and knows everything. The director of CIA is a political appointee. Quite frankly, they're temporary help. Whereas the director of science and technology at CIA, this is a career intelligence professional.
I'm going to stay near the chopper. You dumb fucks do your job.
Private conversations with former President George Herbert Walker Bush in 2003, in which he told me that when he became the CIA director in the Ford administration, he was not briefed on the legacy UAP crash approval program, but he later found out about it, and he informed me that there were a number of crash approvals that had taken place since the mid-1940s. And he also informed me of a UAP event that took place at Holloman Air Force Base in 1964, where 3 UAPs approached the Air Force Base. One of them landed on the tarmac, and a non-human entity deboarded the craft that landed and interacted with uniformed Air Force and civilian CIA personnel. And when he asked for more details, he was told that he did not have any information.
I served over 30 years as an Army Green Beret in the United States Army. I ended my career as Secretary of Defense. Some intelligence official decided I, acting Secretary of Defense, did not have a need to know about the UAP.
Several of my colleagues participated in an organized by the George Bush administration, and the administration contemplated going public with disclosure.
Any more you bitches want to get in my way?
People from intelligence agencies, from the military, some business people, and they said, the Americans, the Russians, and the Chinese all had crash retrieved craft from some other civilization. And there's some belief at this point that maybe this should be revealed to the public. And we want to know what would the consequences be.
This is a topic that has the potential to create serious ontological shock to society. It's not just national security. It's psychological, it's sociological, it's theological, and it's philosophical.
It's undermining in many ways. It's troubling to a lot of people to say that there's something else out there. Is it either otherworldly, interdimensional? I think unfortunately it goes against our traditions, our cultural traditions, our religious traditions, and it challenges the beliefs of a lot of people.
The Vatican has irrefutable evidence that non-human intelligence exists. Although publicly they don't want to acknowledge it, privately they are very well aware of this. What happens when society realizes everything it's been taught about the entire history of our species has been wrong, and everybody learns all at once that we're not the top of the food chain. We're not the alpha predators.
It would be a shakeup for institutions, it'd be a shakeup for norms, it'd be a shakeup in society.
One has to be careful and one has to remember that it's conceivable that there's something that's so disturbing or disruptive or negative that there is a rationale for not immediately disclosing all of that information.
They actually came up with a list of 64 areas it really would be impacted to some significant degree by such an explosion. When we add up all the numbers, it looks like this would be a bad idea.
Did you go through the secret files, the UFO document? Now that you're out of office, you can do anything you want, right? Yeah. But I'm not done.
Without a doubt, there's hardly been any program that's been so successfully kept out of the public eye as anything like crash retrieval, unknown crash. This line of strong control started, at least in the Truman administration, with the Roswell crash.
In ATIP, we learned that the UAP event at the U.S. Army Airfield in Roswell in 1947 did actually occur.
It was described to be a boot-shaped UAP that broke into two pieces on impact, and observers saw what looked like hieroglyphics or some type of writing on it.
You might describe them as runes or glyphs, hieroglyphs that were actually on the craft itself. And within that crash, non-human bodies were recovered.
4 non-human bodies were recovered from the UAP crash at Roswell.
The recovered material from the crash, including the bodies, were all sent up to Wright Field, which is now called Wright
putting you out of business, motherfuckers!
That's where the U.S. had their best reverse engineers.
Think about the context for everything in 1947. The U.S. had just won World War II and was entering into a Cold War with the USSR.
He's here! Get that pug!
These UAP presented a technology of unfathomable power. It was imperative that the U.S. be able to reverse engineer this new technology before anybody else, or before anybody else even knew about it.
You can't tell your friends without telling your enemies. That's a key component to every decision as to what we do or do not release.
Back in 1947, when they looked at this, and they realized it was real, and they realized they had no idea what it was.
You wanna fuck with me? I'll lay all y'all ass down.
Because the role of the President of the United States and the role of the military is to defend the United States and to protect the citizens. This is something that they can't protect against. Well, they're not going to come out and say it. They're not going to scare them.
They don't want to tell the American public about the threat because there's nothing they can do about it.
It was only a couple months after Roswell that President Truman signed the National Security Act of 1947, which established both the Air Force and the Central Intelligence Agency.
How many of these
that was the
fuckers are
start
there?
point in which both the CIA and the Air Force began to take operational control of the UAP pod. But it wasn't until a couple years later when Truman signed the Central Intelligence Agency Act that really endorsed the CIA to be able to run secret intelligence operations outside the normal routine oversight channels. Basically, be able to run operations without anybody knowing. From Roswell on, the strategy for dealing with the public and ensuring U.S. secrecy is maintained was to basically adopt the strategy of deny everything, admit nothing, make counter accusations, put out false claims, intimidate and discredit. In essence, deny. Establish stigma surrounding this topic in order to prevent any kind of distortion.
Executive Order 12333 bans covert action to include the public and the media. But the Legacy Crash Retrieval Program has been ignoring that. In fact, they are
oh shit, there he is! Stand hands up!
By using active disinformation
to create a tradition of disbelief where you basically start very early. Everybody who sees you is practice, and then that gets built in, to the media enterprise. It gets built into Hollywood. It gets built into the public.
CIA funded Hollywood movies in order to create that ridicule factor that they still use to this day.
Do you believe that the recent spike in UFO encounters?
I get the UFO question.
I'm not. I'm just, I loved E.T., the movie, but I'm just going to leave it there.
Up until very recently, there was zero incentive for a naval aviator to come forward and say, this is what I saw. And honestly, up until very recently, there was zero incentive for a U.S. senator to talk about it. Because people would think, what's wrong? This guy's a weirdo.
Over the years, military service members, intelligence officials, and even private citizens have been ridiculed and made to look crazy to the point where people have lost their jobs, they've lost their ability to provide for their families, they've lost their security clearances. These people had their lives ruined simply because they spoke the truth about what they learned or what they saw.
People that come forward with this, I feel like they've taken their life in their own hands.
People think, well, no, government can't keep a secret. Well, there are a number of programs I've been involved in that have never gotten revealed. So the truth of the matter is people and programs can be kept secret. Usually it's just out of personal wanting to protect oneself.
This is the most successful disinformation campaign in the history of the U.S. government. The irony in this is that the deception campaign to create stigma was so successful, it actually inadvertently created a new unforeseen problem. Stigma has been a tremendous problem that is actually a national security threat to the United States. Other countries are not suffering from the stigma that we are. So we are already, as Americans, at a disadvantage. How can we expect to maintain a strategic advantage when 99.999% of all scientists here in this country don't even think it's real?
Science moves forward on the basis of exchanging information. When it's all tied up and held down, you just can't make progress.
You had information being locked away that frankly could improve the lives of every human being on this planet and change the trajectory for species.
This information was and is still being locked down by the legacy crash retrieval program.
Too much information resides in different stovepipes. It's controlled by different baronies and different fiefdoms spread throughout the national security kingdom. They each view information as power. They're each reluctant to share information. They hoard it. They like to trade it like a currency. All of these things conspire to prevent us from getting the big picture and bringing the information together.
It's worth noting that the Air Force didn't contribute any, or maybe just a tiny number of reports of UAPs.
Notwithstanding the fact that the Air Force controls the North American Aerospace Defense Command, they're responsible for space surveillance, they have aircraft with superior radar systems operating in the same training ranges where the Navy is seeing and reporting these aircraft, and yet they claim they don't have evidence of this. Imagine we had a situation where we're saying there are unidentified submarines off the coast of the United States, and the only reports we got were from the Air Force. The Navy had nothing to say about it.
During the George W. Bush administration, the president routinely went down to his ranch in Stevensville, Texas, and I see reporting of UAP activity over the ranch.
F-16s from a nearby Air Force base were alerted to intercept this object. People on the ground saw it.
So I go down and I start asking questions. Hey, what did you chase? I'm acting on behalf of the U.S. government, and we're trying to understand what you saw. And they looked me in the eyes and said, Jay, we cannot tell you what we saw because the OSI, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, came in here, had us sign non-disclosure agreements. We did see something, we did scramble on something, but we can't talk to you about it.
Historically, every time a military member had a UAP encounter, it was very quickly swept under the rug and they were discouraged from talking about it.
They put a form down. There's a non-disclosure form.
He came storming across to me and said, don't you ever say that again. You'll never speak of this.
And it made it very clear that it's something we shouldn't be talking about and just keep our mouth shut.
There was a culture of silence.
I didn't talk to anybody about it, not my wife, not my colleagues, not people I knew. I just shut up.
There's some ramifications if you were to develop
I know.
this information.
We better let this simmer now. Way too much heat. Very nice work, Franklin.
We received an alarm at our closest missile site. There was an object directly above that ICBM nuclear missile, right on top of the blast door. No noise, no sound whatsoever, and it looked like a mini sun sitting in the air. It was the size of a super Walmart building. Not just a Walmart, I mean a super Walmart. This thing was gargantuan. And how it could suspend itself was just completely unnatural to what we know of as anything that can fly or hover.
The captain was just looking up with his mouth open, and I look up
and I see this object right over the missile launch tube. Right over the missile launch tube. Multifaceted, matte, black, finished, an oddly shaped diamond. Absolutely silent, made no noise. There was no means of propulsion. 50 feet up in the air, sitting absolutely still. And it was amazing. We kind of looked at one another, and we were just human beings witnessing something extraordinary. And while we're watching this thing, it went from dead still, and it shot off toward the horizon and was gone. Absolutely instant acceleration.
We had 60 cameras so that the engineers at Boeing and Douglas could see every millisecond of the ignition. The missile in question that we photographed was an Atlas D, carrying, as part of an experiment, a dummy nuclear warhead. As it was flying along, the warhead, the chaff, something else entered the frame. It sent a beam of light and hit the warhead, flew up like this, shoot another beam of light down at the warhead, went like this, shot another beam of light at the warhead, went under here, shot a beam of light at the warhead, and then flew out the way to come in. All the while, everything in our frame was moving along at 8,000 to 9,000 miles an hour. There's nothing that far that could have done that. Could have done that.
There was this red-orange light hovering above the front gate. It was about 40 feet in diameter, sort of oval shape. And each missile was announcing guidance and control system failure. Our missiles were starting to go down, so we had all 10 of them go down. Within the span of 8 days, we lost 20 nuclear missiles to UFOs.
Vandenberg is home to the infrastructure that supports our National Missile Defense Project, the system that defends our country from incoming ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons. So it's one of the most important bases we have. On October 14, 2003, I showed up to work at Vandenberg Air Force Base, and immediately everybody just started to tell me about this UFO incident that had happened earlier that morning.
I reported for work at Vandenberg Air Force Base. We were given a briefing that earlier in the day, some Boeing contractors had witnessed a UAP incursion.
3 Boeing contractors had called in and reported that a gigantic red square object was floating over the launch pad at low altitude. It was making no noise, it had no obvious signs of propulsion, and it was just hovering silently. It was a very serious security breach of the area.
And we were told just to be vigilant when we were out on our shift that night.
And I spent the most of the day driving around the base and looking for these objects.
Later that night, myself and 5 security forces members, we observed a bright light approaching the base. As it got closer, the light was no longer visible, and it was massive, the size of a football field, almost rectangular in shape. It was just floating there, no propulsion system, no windows. It was matte black. We observed it for another 45 seconds, and then it shot off thousands of miles an hour of the coast.
I talked to all the direct witnesses, over a dozen people, and even from their different vantage points, they all told the same story. They all saw the same.
The UAP activity surrounding nuclear weapons was not a historical issue. It's an ongoing issue.
Despite the long-standing denial by the United States Air Force, we now have both former and current very senior Air Force officials stating for the record that in fact the Air Force has had a long-standing involvement in UAP.
I served in the Air Force for 32 years. I was in the Air Force as Chief of Air Force Intelligence prior to becoming Director of Defense Intelligence Agency. When I served in the Air Force, there was an active program to track anomalous activities that we couldn't otherwise explain. Many of them connected with ranges out west, notably Area 51.
As Congress learned more about the legacy program, they realized how powerful and influential defense contractors like the Army.
we just take the actual structure of the interaction between the government and private industry.
Any more you bitches want to get my
Over
way?
the years, it has morphed, transitioned into it being largely the agency of the contractors. If you do something within the government, eventually it can be accessed by Freedom of Information Act. But if you do something through contractors, they're not available through Freedom of Information Act. I've been involved in
Where's
some
the info?
where
Where the fuck is he? I'll blaze all you fools if I have to.
Contractor.
I'm putting you out of business, motherfuckers.
Accessed easily by the public.
But what happens with government, you need continuity. People move, people die,
You wanna fuck
and
with
so
me?
what
I'll
winds up
lay all
happening
y'all
is you
ass
have these
down.
legacy efforts going on in the government contractor side involving UAP.
And then I, the government official in charge of this program, leave. And someone else takes my place. And that person might have a little bit of awareness of this project.
I ain't
But
playing
then
here.
there's
Where the
a
fuck is
third person
Benelli?
who has no idea of the project. But the corporate entity that received this technology is still trying to benefit.
How many of these fuckers are there?
Some of the stuff begins to seep out, and these great innovations that some companies coming up with and making money on, and they claim it belongs to them and it's proprietary. And the people in government who know where it came from originally, they're long gone, and their successors have no idea that it was there at all. And so you can start to foresee where you create in corporate hands an extraordinary amount of power. The real risk that in transferring technology that is not useful to us today to a corporate entity, over decades that corporate entity comes to basically possess and control access to it for their own purposes, not for the purposes of national security.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
The reason why our democracy is so strong, because it's of the people and by the people and for the people. It's not acceptable to have secret parts of government that no one ever sees. It would be unconscionable, it's against our Constitution, and it's wrong.
Non-human intelligence is not government information, and the government should not be keeping that knowledge from the people.
Before he passed away, I had the privilege of seeing Senator Harry Reid quite a few times in his private residence. He explained to me that he was once provided information in the legacy program, but denied access. He was incensed by that. And when the opportunity came to sponsor ATIP, he jumped at the opportunity in order to ensure that Congress and the government had visibility into this topic.
I'm doing it.
And frankly, we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for the courage of Senator Harry Reid.
Why the federal government all these years has covered up, put brake pads on everything. Stop. I think it's very, very bad for our country. Should we study this stuff? The answer is yes. And that's all this is about.
For decades, our government assumed there must be different exotic technologies responsible for each of the observables. But our scientists realized one breakthrough technology could actually be responsible.
It's taken care of, but man, that shit went...
I know. We went...
With enough energy, you could create a bubble, a warp bubble, around the spacecraft that would have a different property of space-time inside the bubble than on the outside of the bubble.
This energy field would completely isolate the craft from the environment. So you might ask then, how does the craft actually move forward within its bubble?
The craft inside the bubble has a way of altering the bubble's properties in order to change its direction of motion.
Such that you have a downward press in front and an upward press behind. So it'd be like riding space-time in the same way that a surfer would ride a wave in the ocean. And we observe hypersonic velocity and instantaneous acceleration. And the reason is that time is moving differently for people inside the bubble versus people outside the bubble. Whoever's inside the craft would feel like they're just cruising along. They wouldn't be feeling the effects of what looks like speeds and accelerations that would turn a human being into pudding. This one breakthrough can be the key to interstellar travel, where you want to travel long distances without taking enormous amounts of subjective time. We'd also have low observability because the bubble acts as a barrier between two space-time environments. This would eliminate or conceal most of the known signatures of conventional technologies. This is why radar would have difficulty tracking a craft, because the signal from the radar would be distorted by the energy field around the craft.
The radar signatures literally just move around the bubble and doesn't reflect back to the radar image.
So it's not surprising when someone takes a photo of a UAP, they find they get a fuzzy and distorted picture because they're actually taking a photo through a space-time barrier. What's been happening recently is that we have upgraded our sensor systems on our fighter aircraft. And these images that are now picked up with our advanced sensor systems, we can begin to see the actual structure of the energy field around the craft, which in the past they would not have been able to do. We also observe transmedium travel because the craft is moving within its own space-time, and the outside environment through which it's moving is inconsequential. This would allow a craft to go seamlessly from space through the atmosphere and into the water.
And they could do so because the warp bubble that surrounds them shunts air molecules or ocean water molecules around the craft so that it can move effortlessly through any medium.
We also observe anti-gravity because the Earth's gravitational field is no longer having any effect on the craft inside the space-time bubble. This is why a craft does not need, say, engines or wings or other aspects that we would associate it with a craft that needs to fly in the atmosphere. It's really disconnected from the atmosphere. And the energy field associated with each craft causes a highly energetic wave of radiation, which is why people getting too close to a UAP can experience biological effects that are harmful to humans. Now that we understand that these craft exist in a space-time environment that's different from the exterior space-time environment, this can begin to explain claimed observations by, say, military people who have approached and gotten into a craft and find that time is running at a different rate inside the craft than time running outside the craft. They think they're only there for a few minutes, and they come outside the craft, some hours have gone by. So they feel like they've got